Hello and welcome to Different Senses, Different Worlds, the show where we discuss our personal sensory differences and how they affect our experiences of the world around us. Today I'm joined by the lovely Bella Mearns, who will be talking about how the sensory differences that come with autism affect her world-making experience. In the past, research on sensory differences tended not to include those of people with autism, as it was seen as not properly part of the human experience and instead something closer to a robotic experience. However, this was all changed by the theory of autistic sociality, which created a more inclusive ethnographic framework to study sensory differences from. This gives a more well-rounded insight into the human experience and its vast varieties, because people's sensory differences are what create their personal experience of the world. So Bella, which of your senses are affected most by autism?
I mean, all of them are affected in different ways, but I'd say, obviously, when I'm eating, taste is the most affected, as well as sensation and touch. And then hearing, I do have an auditory processing disorder as like a comorbidity with autism, so that can be quite overwhelming. I get overwhelmed by sounds quite easily.
Which everyday scenarios do you say this sort of affects the most?
Probably in-person scenarios, or if I'm really stressed or overwhelmed with work. I get overwhelmed quite easily, so in high stimulation days, I tend to have issues socialising, going into large environments with lots of people.
And how does this affect the way that you interact with these situations?
Usually I try to avoid them. Obviously there's not always a way to avoid these situations, so let's say you're in work, you're in university, and you're in a tutorial. You can't just leave the tutorial. Sometimes you just have to deal with the sensory build-up. So that can be quite annoying, but on high stimulation days I just make sure that I take it easy.
So do you feel you have like different boundaries when navigating the world because of these sensory differences?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is probably the biggest thing is people don't realise, although I'm very high functioning and I mask incredibly well, I do have a lot of boundaries that I kind of have to make sure I step back on, and I can't overdo it. I really do need to give myself a break sometimes, but I'm not usually kind of given that excuse. But yeah, there's sometimes, obviously, as I said before, where I can't leave a situation. I just have to deal with the sensory build-up, which can be quite stressful, and it's obviously not a nice feeling.
Clearly then, Bella has a vastly different world experience to myself, someone who is neurotypical, and these are a result of her sensory differences. By analysing them, a clear and more inclusive picture can be painted of the overall human experience, hence providing new modes of anthropological understanding of this. You've been listening to Harry Melander and Bella Mearns. See you next time on Different Senses, Different Worlds. Goodbye.